Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to Jill and J-Sei for hosting us here today and putting on this amazing event with Kai. And thank you to J-Sei for being such an important community space for so many in our community. And I want to give a shout out to my father-in-law, Victor Uno, who's on the J-Sei board, and my mother-in-law, Josie Camacho, who is active in the Ikebana classes and hip hop dance and taiko. So proud and happy for her to do. Um, it's so amazing to be here and to be here with you all and to be asked to do this. I feel so honored. So thank you. I am very honored to introduce Kai Naima Williams to you all today and to celebrate her and this beautiful, beautiful book that she wrote. It'll make me start crying every time I look at her and we start talking about it. So I'm very honored to celebrate Kai Naima Williams, great-granddaughter of Yuri Kochiyama, granddaughter of Adi Kochiyama Holman, our dear, dear family friend and Oakland's finest. So let me introduce Kai. So Kai Naima Williams is a multidisciplinary writer and performing artist based in Harlem, New York. She is the author of 2 poetry chapbooks, Tomorrow Maps and He Tried to Drown the Ocean, I Waved, and the children's book, The Bridges Yuri Built, How Yuri Kochiyama Marched Across Movements. Her writing has been featured in Louisiana Literature, Abolition Is, and Crown Magazine, and the upcoming anthology from Haymarket Books, Black and Asian Feminist Solidarities, amongst other publications. Her work has been honored by the Tennessee Williams and New Orleans Literary Festival, the Asian American Arts Alliance, MoCADA, and the New York Times. She is also a co-founder of Eat at the Table Theater Company. You can learn more about her work by checking out her website, kainaima.com, or following her Instagram at kainaima. Yay. Yay. Thank you for coming. So to kick us off, I just wanted to ask you, Kai, to tell us a little bit about your story. You're a writer of poetry and fiction, and would love to hear about growing up in a social justice aware family and about your relationship with your great grandma Yuri.
Absolutely. First, I'm honored to be here with you, Mia, and I got to say hi to your parents yesterday, and I know how important they are to my grandma. So this is really a family affair. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks everyone for coming out. Yeah, I grew up in the Bronx. I have been writing since I was a kid, and uh, writing in all different kinds of mediums, fiction and poetry, as you mentioned. I think it was an immense privilege and blessing to grow up in a family that was not just socially conscious, but was really full of activists and artists on both sides of my family. It certainly impacted the artist that I am. And I think that many artists will attest to the value of having a supportive family. And I was very lucky to have a long lineage of people who were not just artists, but political artists and engaged in activism and art, which feed each other. Activism kind of formed my family as well. My grandparents met in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and my mom and dad met each other because their parents, or knew each other from the time they were children, because their parents met in movement organizing and the Asian American movement in New York. So I think that it's kind of a part of the fabric of my family and truly in our DNA. Growing up, I knew my grandma Yuri just as that. I didn't really have a sense of the scope of her work or her legacy, or the importance of her as a figure until after she passed away. But I grew up obviously on the East Coast with my brother and my family, and she at that point was already out here in Oakland. So we would come out in the summers and see her. And I think I had sort of a peripheral idea of her importance, because when we would gather at these family reunions that I'm sure your parents were at, and were really gatherings of everybody who was connected to my family, not just blood relatives. People would really gravitate towards her. So it's been an honor to be able to get to know her more through this work, even after the fact of her passing, and to be able to pay tribute in this way.
And what brought you to writing a children's book about your great grandma?
It was happenstance. It was really coincidental. I never set out to write for children's. It's a very different kind of writing than I'm used to, and it was really a challenging process, something I had to learn through trial and error. But about 4 years ago, kind of almost to this day, on my great grandmother's birthday, Yuri's birthday, which she incidentally shares with Malcolm X, I just put out like a tweet thread. And I think I was just saying, today would have been my great grandmother's 99th birthday. This is who she is. This is some work that she did. And it happened to go viral. And then the next day I was approached by an editor in my inbox, and she had seen that I was a writer, and she mentioned that no one had written a children's book about Yuri before. She'd sort of appeared in anthologies of children's literature, but no one had told her story for that particular audience. And this editor had asked if, maybe I would consider that as something I would be interested in doing. And I was. So I kind of just took it on as an assignment, but it was definitely a very difficult process for many reasons, but an extremely rewarding one as well. And it's not something that I would have thought, or not a medium in which I would have thought that I would tell Yuri's story. But I feel very blessed to have had the opportunity.
So one of the things that immediately jumped out at me when I read your book was the sweetness that you tell your great grandma's story. She's like this giant icon now, she's a revolutionary. She's a leader. My son in his class, second grade, they do a living museum, and one of his classmates was Yuri Kochiyama. So she's like, this like legendary figure now. But your book is so sweet. Like what came across to me was how accessible you made, how she entered activism through these simple acts of human kindness, from, writing letters to inviting people into her home for a meal, to providing shelter to people who need it. Or signing petitions, like these very simple acts of building community and building relationship and showing love and care to others. And I thought that was so relatable, and it just showed, just her level of sweetness and care. And I just wanted to ask you, like, what was really important for you to share with the world, especially to kids, about your great grandma Yuri?
I'm so happy that that's what you picked up on, because it was really, that was such an important intention for me to really demonstrate the practical methods that she used to connect to people and to build community. And these were ways of being in the world that that characterized her as a person, and that were also really present in her from the time that she was a child. And that's what I wanted to come through for a young audience, because she, before she was an activist, she was a community service oriented person, and she was incredibly active in her community, even when she was growing up in this very apolitical environment, in a very sort of naive conditioning. she was, you know, a Girl Scout. She taught Sunday school. She volunteered with the school paper. She was a cheerleader. Like she was always a person that cared about the people around her and who really loved people. And I wanted that sweetness and that care that was inherent in her personality, even from the beginning, to be an important characterization for her when I was writing, because those qualities were what primed her then to become the activist she was. Even before she was kind of this radicalized revolutionary person, I think it really was those qualities that she was able to develop in herself and nurture from childhood that allowed her to be extraordinary in the ways that she was just so energized to support people, to support political prisoners, to invite people into her home, to give them shelter. Um, and that is something that children, I think, can develop in themselves and pick up on. And I wanted that to come through because I wanted children who read the book or had the book read to them to know that, you know, they can engage and they can participate. They don't have to be, they don't have to have the agency of adulthood where maybe you can participate in ways that are tougher or more aggressive or more what we think of when we think of radical revolutionary figures. That kind of caring for others is also a way of making a difference and something that people can do immediately. So I really wanted her personality to be a focal point because it's what made her who she is, and it's also what made her the activist that she was.
What really came through.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm curious, especially for the kids in the room, if your great grandma Yuri could, if her spirit entered the being of a living animal,
Yeah.
like she was a creature among us right now, what do you think that it would be?
I have two ideas. My first thought is that there are certain kinds of birds, right, that communicate with each other. And I think when I think about her, I think about how she was such a communications person with the letter writing and the relationship building. So I think, and also, I don't know if it's like hummingbirds or bluebirds or something that are so like loquacious, and also they like deliver messages amongst each other and repeat things, and also have incredible energy. So that's kind of what I see. But also I think about how my grandma Yuri loved teddy bears and loved particularly collected Care Bears. So I guess that's not really a living animate animal, but I kind of think that she would be a Care Bear if she was an animal. That feels like what her spirit is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's adorable. I remember, yeah, with all her Care Bears. So also for the kids in the room, well, just I wanted to ask you about the power of the pen. So your great grandma was such a prolific writer in so many ways, right?
Yeah.
Not everything from letters to like publications to just petitions and protest signs. And we know she wrote so many letters through the course of her life. And you now are this amazing writer. So I just wanted to ask you what you think your great grandma, the power that she felt with that pen, and what do you feel?
Yeah. I would love to know, I would love to know what that felt like for her, sort of the tangible, physical connection to the pen was for her, because both symbolically and I think actually literally thinking about how she would carry them around and how they were tools for her. Um, I would love to know sort of if she felt a particular visceral sense of empowerment from just being able to, because it was, you know, a tool that enabled her to connect with people, obviously through the letter writing. But another thing that I think is very characteristic of Yuri is the fact that anytime she would meet a person, she would take down their name and their address so that she could correspond with them. And so the result of that being, she had a lifetime of address books. When she passed, some of her belongings are now in archives at different universities, but some of them are still in my family's home because she just had boxes on boxes of these books with literally everyone she's ever met, which also helped her remember people. So I am curious, what that would have been like for her, what that would have felt like for her. But for me, I remember when I was first coming to writing, probably like 9 or 10, and sitting down at the family computer back when that was thing, and being able to spend my, I don't know, after school time or my weekends writing stories. And I feel like I have this vivid memory, this feeling memory of the first time I like finished a story, and I would open a Word doc and write in like 30-point type because I wanted to have pages and pages and print them out. And I remember finishing my first one, like coming to completion, coming to the end of a story, and just feeling this incredibly like physical sense of power and accomplishment, this like heart beating, sweating type of feeling, because I had this this feeling of release, that something could have formulated in my imagination and that I could physically translate that and transmute that through typing. And that's the kind of feeling that I think I've just since that moment chased and pursued, and has become the work of my life to continue to have that and to feel that. And I'm sure, any artist or creative person can really feel that sense of flow, when it's there. It's not always easy to access. As a kid, it was a lot easier for me to access, but I do remember being changed kind of viscerally by that feeling. And it was very physical. It was very much about sort of being in my body and realizing that what I had dreamt, I could now read and feel and touch. And so I think that's an incredible feeling, definitely drives me as an artist.
It's awesome. So I just wanted to ask you about the story that you wrote. So your great grandma had such like a long life and so many different experiences, and you covered like a segment of her life. Can
Yeah.
you tell us like what the thought process was in what you highlighted in your book, particularly around like Malcolm X and other parts of her life?
Yeah, it was a really hard process because there was so much I had to omit. And I was coming up against the friction of knowing that I had these length constraints because it's a children's book. So I couldn't go on and on and on. And as a writer, I am very rambly and meandering in my prose. So it was really, really difficult. Also because she had such a full life and accomplished so many things and transformed in so many ways. But I knew I had to really focus on certain moments. So something that was sort of a blueprint for me, or a guiding thought, was that I knew that I wanted to tell the story about her connections with people and about how she really believed that communities were stronger together, and that to change the world, you needed to incorporate people. You needed to incorporate others around you. So I wanted every sort of moment in the book to highlight that, and for community building and relationship building to be sort of the solution that would propel her through all of these either very difficult or just very important moments in her life. So for example, I thought it was really important to start at the beginning and to talk about who she was as a child. And in general, I wanted to talk about who she was, but not just who she was, but rather how she arrived at becoming the person she was. And what were the events and the people that transformed her consciousness. So I wanted to talk about how she was as a child engaged with her community. And then I wanted to talk about how, you know, when she's in the prison camps and she's sort of being confronted with systemic racism for the first time and feeling isolated, what does she do? She creates the letter writing campaign to the J-Sei soldiers so that they won't feel alone. And she mobilizes the other young girls in her camp so that they can reach out to the J-Sei soldiers. And in the end, they end up reaching 13,000 soldiers. So the problem there is this feeling of isolation and this feeling of otherness. And the solution is to bring people in and bring people together. And then I wanted to think about when she, you know, enters the civil rights movement, it's because she moves to Harlem and she starts to realize that the people around her, she's sort of meeting and being in community with Black Americans for the first time and coming to terms with the realities of racism for Black people in America. And so then her imperative is to learn more about the community around her and to become a part of that movement and to support the people around her. So in choosing the moments that were going to be highlighted and emphasized in the book, I wanted to make sure each one of them was sort of coming up against a problem of division, and then her realizing that the way forwards is to join with others and to emphasize that coalition. So that was kind of the way that I would select certain moments. But in some ways, it really feels like kind of the part one of a much larger story, because I had to decide to sort of end the book right at the turn of when she's becoming radicalized and transforming into a more revolutionary figure as opposed to just someone who's engaged in activism. So there's so many more stories I could have told about the person she becomes. And some of those stories are like the most interesting ones. But I thought it was more important to talk about the way that she grew and changed, both what was inherent in her that would then allow her to become that person, but then what those turning points were like and how the direction of her life took her there. But yeah, I mean, it was really hard to let some of those stories go.
Well, it was really well done, and I think we would all love a part two. But
Thank you.
If your great grandma Yuri was alive, what would you want to ask her after doing all this research into her life and telling, you know, her story in a children's book? What are some questions that you may have for her?
I would want to ask her, I would want to know where she got her energy from, because I understand that she was like an extraordinary person with an extraordinary capacity for effort, excuse me, and energy. But I want to know if there were ways that she like practically preserved herself. Because a lot of the time when I read or research about her, it does kind of just seem like she had that fire in her to be writing 10 letters a night or to be remembering all of those people that she met, or just being out there, being committed not just to one struggle or one movement, but to participating in as many as possible and continuously learning up until she passed away.
Mhm.
So I know that some of that is because of just the person she was, but I also want to know, like, were there ways that she was able to maintain that? Were there practices? Were there mantras? Were there ideas that she clung to be able to do that? Because I would love to know. And I guess I also want to know, like, I would love to ask her, like, where, uh, was she ever afraid? Because when I read about her, it really just seems like she had this outstanding courage. I was just reading uh, Heartbeat of Struggle by Diane Fujino, which is a biography of Yuri, and reading about the first demonstration that she participated in 1963, and how she was arrested at that demonstration. And I think that Diane had asked her about, how did that make her feel? And she was just kind of like, well, everyone was doing it, so it was fine. It was cool. So I'm just, and there are other ways that Yuri participated in action, like and mutual aid, like opening her home to whomever needed shelter, or throwing these open houses every Saturday night where anyone could kind of just come and be there. And there were risks involved um, in the ways that she participated. So it just seems like she was so fearless, and I guess I'm curious about that. If she was ever afraid, like how she mitigated that and did not allow it to overpower or overtake her commitment to justice. Or if it was just really that's the person she was. Uh, and I would love to just ask her to tell me the stories from her own perspective, because I never really got to do that. I never really got to sit and conversate with her about her life in that way. She died when I was a teenager, but I would give a lot to be able to have those conversations with her.
I have one more question, and then maybe we could open it up to anyone else if you have any questions. So many of us, especially in families and communities that have experienced systemic oppression, discrimination, trauma, we have stories to tell. We have stories in our ancestors that have been passed down. We have stories in our own family. And those stories are so important. Just like I'm so glad that you told your great grandma's story. And there's so much more there too. What advice do you have to those of us who have stories to tell in our own families?
Yeah, tell them. I think I think that it's one of the most valuable things you can do to whether that's for a particular reason or not. I don't think that you have to present or publish those stories unless you want to. If you have that instinct, then I think it's very worthy to follow that. But I think that it will always be valuable to be able to preserve those stories and those narratives for posterity, for yourself, to understand oneself and one's place in the world. And um, I think that it's a beautiful thing to be able to inherit them. And especially if you're a person who wants to write or create in any way, um, and tell those stories, I think that being able to having the opportunity to actually like speak to elders in your family, or family members, relatives, and document those things is an incredibly special opportunity. And I think that everyone who has that impulse should follow it and pursue that, and seek them out in whatever way makes sense to you. Um, it has definitely been an honor for me to be able to do that in this way. So I really recommend it for anyone who's interested in doing that. I think it's one of the best things you can do.
Yay, thanks, Kai. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Kai? Oh.
Thank you. Hi, Kai.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming here. When your great grandma was alive, she came with your great grandfather to our house in Oakland. And we were so proud about her coming. And our son in front of me, we named him Malcolm Amado Uno after Malcolm X. And she told the story about her relationship with Malcolm X. And I thought it would be wonderful to share that in this venue, especially for the grandparents, parents, and children and friends, to see that really important connection she established with the Black community.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry, what is your name?
Oh, I'm Josie.
Hi, Josie.
That's my
That's
husband's
your
mom.
mother-in-law?
Yeah.
Thanks
All in
for
the
coming out.
family.
I'm sorry, are you asking about Malcolm, for me to talk about Malcolm and Yuri's relationship? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so Yuri met Malcolm in 1963, actually, right as she's beginning to be active. And she admired him for a very long time, admired him deeply in the work that he was doing. And she meets him at a courthouse. I believe she had been arrested. And I was just reading the story about their meeting. And she wanted to go up to him and to tell him that she admired him. But she was not sure how she would be received because, like in many of the spaces she occupied, she was the only Asian woman there. So she went up to him and she asked to shake his hand. And I think at first he was a little bit uncertain, and he asked her why. And she said that she wanted to thank him. And he said, for what? And congratulate him. And he asked her for what? And she said, for what you're doing for your people. And then after that, they developed this correspondence. And as I'm reading the story, he broke into a big smile and he shook her hand, and that was incredibly meaningful for her. But they ended up having this relationship where they would correspond through letter writing. He visited her at her house in Harlem, and when he visited, she and Bill, her husband, were hosting some visitors from Japan, and they were victims of the Hiroshima bombings. And so there was word that Malcolm might come to the house. So the visitors were there, and then everyone in the neighborhood who wanted to meet Malcolm X also came out. And when he visited, he spoke about the connections between Africa and Asia, about their histories. He spoke about the connections between racism suffered by Black Americans and racism that the Hiroshima bombings had faced. And he talked about the Vietnam War, and he made these connections between Black and Asian communities. So it's really interesting to me that their relationship is not just sort of this example of Black and Asian solidarity, and that there are these two figures, these two movement figures, a Black man and an Asian woman, but that both of them were concerned with solidarity. And so Yuri just loved him. He would send her postcards when he traveled to Mecca, and she would send him letters and letters. And then, as many people know, she was present during his assassination. And when he was murdered at the Audubon Ballroom, she ran up on stage and cradled his head while he was dying. So I think his impact on her as a figure, not as a figure, as a person, can't be understated because she was incredibly radicalized, not just by his death, but by his life and by his teachings. She became a member of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, which was his organization. I believe she was, if not the only Asian member, one of them, certainly. And yeah, he had a profound impact on her beliefs, and her transformation as, someone who had previously kind of been a reformist and ended up being a revolutionary. So I think that his who he was really shaped who she became. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting story about their friendship, their brief friendship, that had a lasting impact on her.
What is your next step in terms of your writing, or what other projects do you have?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, so right now I'm working on sort of getting back into fiction. So I primarily wrote fiction, mostly short stories, for most of my life. And then in the last few years, I started, most of the projects that I've published are poetry projects. And I sort of came to poetry by way of spoken word, and I've been working, yeah, predominantly on poetry. So now I'm sort of trying to pivot back into my fiction writing, but I guess I will use this opportunity to plug my my latest chapbook was published last year by the Hunger Press. It's called Tomorrow Maps. If people, everyone should come up and talk to me after, and if you want to get a book, I'll sign it. But there, I have physical copies that unfortunately I forgot to bring, but I have a digital copy as well. So you can either purchase directly from the Hunger Press's website, or you can purchase from me. And if you just leave your email address with me, and a suggested donation, then I will send you a digital copy if you're interested. But yes, so I'm sort of working now just on sort of rediscovering and easing myself back into the practice of fiction writing. And so I don't know sort of what I'm working on or trying to generate, but I'm sort of just working on my on my craft at the moment. But yes, please you can feel free to check out my work is also, on my website and on my socials as well.
I'm honored to be here to hear you speak, and I'm asking a question, but just because I work with Quabilis Shabazz Malcolm's family, share with you something about your great grandmother you may not know, right? One, a lot of people don't know that Quabilis had told me that only 3 people were allowed to cook food for Brother Malcolm's family. One being Sister Sarah, Betty Shabazz, and your mother and your great grandmother, to show you how close they were. And a lot of people don't know that when, and I noticed my friends making a documentary, when Malcolm was, house was bombed, a lot of people from OAU got there like instantly. And you know why? It was Saturday night. So where were they all at? They were at Yuri's house. Yeah, a lot of people, they're all good. And it was like 2, 3 in the morning, but they were staying there all night, and they were able to get there that fast. And so she played a real prominent role in Malcolm's life. And Malcolm's grandson, who unfortunately was murdered and killed in Mexico City, actually on the 9th of this month, coming on 11 years. I had to bury him and everything. But when your great grandmother kept him going when he was incarcerated by writing him letters. And he would always be getting these letters when he was incarcerated, where she was, he went through a hard time in his life, but she was always bringing him back. And when he finally got to come here to meet him, they said all she did was touch his face, because she was thinking about Malcolm when she was touching his face the whole time. So, but my question to you is, with Adi and your family and everything, you come from a good breed of people, and you have what do you call that? A legacy and a DNA. Well, what's going on today? And I brought these young brothers right here. They're part of the People's Program here in Berkeley that you need to network with and everything. What do you see your legacy for the young people today out protesting and what they're doing? Not just about what's going on in Palestine right now, but just globally, because there is a paradigm shift, right? And the reason I ask is I always argue because I hate the word allyship. It's horrible because Malcolm would never call Yuri an ally. It was solidarity. And you use the word solidarity. And how can we get a group of people and you're understanding your responsibility? I'm putting it on you. You know what I'm saying? You stand on a lot of shoulders, right? Not just from Yuri, but from your whole family and everything. What do you feel your responsibility is? And what would you say to a newer generation of people who are struggling to continue the movement that Yuri participated in?
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I didn't know that. I also I struggle a lot with the word ally as well. I mean, I think ally sort of indicates it's not a mutual position, right? I think the privileging of the word allyship obscures what the real work needs to be. You want to be in solidarity, you want to be a comrade to people. Allyship is not a mutual position. It's someone from a position of power helping in whatever way they can to support people from a marginalized community. That's not being in relation in the way that is important. I'm very moved and inspired by the student protests currently. I think that the resistance is so strong. And I think I've been thinking a lot about that in relation to Yuri. I think that she would be incredibly proud of the student protesters. I'm hoping to be able to support and show up in the way that I can as well in New York. Yeah, absolutely. It's a responsibility to continue her work. And I want to be, personally, I want to be as active as possible, supporting the Palestinian people amongst other causes. And I'm hopeful that all young people who are noticing and engaging with the way that particularly the students have been able to mobilize and resist, tap in and continue to do that, because I think it is a paradigm shift. So yeah, absolutely. That is my responsibility and others.
We have time for one more question. Oh, back there.
Besides congratulating you on your book, your first children's book, as a retired kindergarten teacher, I'm so happy to see a children's storybook about someone like Yuri, who is obviously a one of a kind. And so it just promotes the fact that, you know, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to see a story about a person of color who was very small, and was very petite, and yet she was such a strong-willed person, and really she accomplished so much in her short life. But thank you. I hope there's another chapter of Yuri's story that you can present in this form, you know, as a children's story, because there's not much out there. But so thank you for your contribution.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I really am so grateful that you're here. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Kai. It's just a follow-up from these last two gentlemen's comments and questions, but the theme that really spoke to me is how Yuri built bridges, not walls. And that's the name of your book too. And I know, Mia, you mentioned it earlier about how we can all, give each other love and really be rooted in solidarity. So what do you think are the best ways that we can build bridges with one another?
Thank you for that question. I think it's a good imperative to lead with curiosity. And, you know, Yuri was able to support so many movements just on the strength of wanting to learn about the struggles of others, and then having the dedication and the energy to follow that education through with active support and participation in action. So I think that it begins with understanding that as all of our oppressions are interconnected, so are our freedoms, and to hold being solidarity in the highest esteem. I think that for some people, in some people's perspectives, solidarity can be rhetorical. And because of that, it can be sort of diminished. But practical solidarity is so important. It's so important to be in pursuit of freedom for everyone. So I think committing to learning, supporting in every way that you can, and be willing to go to places in which you might be uncomfortable, in which your presence may be questioned, you know, as Yuri did. Yuri was able to be sort of invited into these spaces because people recognized that dedication in her. But I don't think it was easy. I don't think it was automatic. I think that she was often sort of, her presence in some of these Black liberation spaces, or spaces in which she was the only Asian person or the only Asian woman, you know, there was a friction there, a tension there, but because she was committed to supporting people, and that was clear in the way that she continuously showed up, then people were able to engage with her and to invite her back. So I think that it can be uncomfortable to position ourselves amongst and in support of people who don't share our backgrounds. But I think that it's important to follow through regardless. Obviously, you have to be aware of sort of what your positionality is, and, you know, not taking space away from the most marginalized people or the most silenced people in the room. Being aware of your position is important, but I also think you have to seek out those spaces where you can learn and be involved. But yeah, I think that that's crucial. Learning and then following through and dedicating yourself to being in service to others, and to movements, whether or not you are a person in the center of them.
I think we'll wrap up, but I think I can just say your great grandma would be so proud. You're carrying on a very amazing legacy of a very proud family. And that there's so much power in that pen. It takes vulnerability and focus, and there's so many lessons that you're sharing with us through her that we're all learning 3 generations later. And it's so beautiful. And I'm a crier. But I'm just so moved because your great grandma is still teaching us so much through you. And it's, you know, it's a heavy responsibility, but it's also an incredible legacy, and it's a gift that you're sharing with all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you. Thank you everyone so much for coming out. I really appreciate you all being here so much. I just wanted to thank the people involved. Thank you to Jill Sharecki and Lou Nakasako for filming, Carol Dow and Carl Jagbundenson as well. If I've forgotten anyone, I'm very sorry. Thank you. I'm so thankful for you, Mia. I really appreciate you moderating and for everyone for coming out. So thank you so much.